All right, peace, fam. What's going on? This is your brother Assad. I wanted to take a brief moment and also check in, but also I want to talk about this perception that African Americans have of Africa, and I don't want to generalize all African Americans, because many of our brothers and sisters know the truth about Africa. Many of our brothers and sisters have visited or at least investigated Africa through YouTube or through Google searches, or we've had interactions with continental Africans who live in the United States who have helped to reshape the perception of Africa. But there are still far too many Black Americans who have a negative connotation of the continent. And I am very sensitive to those individuals because I understand the imaging and the propaganda that has been weaponized against Black people to make us dislike and want to disconnect from the continent of Africa. So I know in the last video I spoke about Trevor Noah and his perception that Black Americans live like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or Black Americans live like Family Matters or Martin, and Family Matters may be closer to what some Black Americans or more Black Americans live like than the Fresh Prince of Bel Air or even the Cosby Show, which was a phenomenal representation or presentation of blackness, but not necessarily did it not necessarily was it representative of the majority of Black folk. The majority of Black folk in America are in financial hardship, right? These are the numbers. Those are the facts. We can, look those up. So we don't have butlers. We don't have a Jeffrey living in our house. The vast majority of us don't have a butler, or drivers or any of that. That's television, and it's a it's propaganda to make the world think that Black Americans are equal in this nation, and also to show our brothers and sisters in Africa a false image of what America has in store for Black people. But on the flip side of that is the perception that African Americans have of Africa. And that has also been, again, the images and the perception that we have been shaped by the weaponry of the enemy. And so I want to just touch on a few quick points. Many older African Americans, 60, 70 years old, they grew up in a time where the one of the largest TV shows, the most popular TV shows was Tarzan, right? And he was in the jungles of Africa. So this is the perception that many black older Black Americans had of Africa, was that Africa, right, was still in, well, was some sort of jungle. It was underdeveloped, and the people were near savages, right? And just think about what that does to the psyche of an African American. Your name is attached, right? Our identity as African Americans is then attached to what the the media and Hollywood has created this image of savagery, and now we're attached to that savagery. We're attached to those barbarian people in Africa with in their jungles. So that made a lot of older African Americans, right? And it wasn't just Tarzan, it was other images, throughout Hollywood. This is all pre-internet, right? So the only ideas that we had of Africa, if we had not met a continental African, or we had not visited ourselves, which the majority of Black folk did not have the opportunity to travel outside of the United States, right? So our only the our only frame of reference um, for Africa, or these older African Americans, their only frame of reference for Africa uh, were movies and television. And in those movies and television shows, um, They portrayed Africa in a way that made Africa appear undeveloped and made Africans appear backward and savage. It made it appear not to be a safe place. There were no cities. Everything is in the savannah or the jungle, right? So for older African Americans, this built up an internalized resentment of any association with Africa because by that presentation of Africa, it's somehow shown and reflected on us as being also backward because we're African Americans, right? So we must be an extension of that savagery. We must be an extension of that backwardness, right? So that made many older African Americans want to distance themselves as much as possible from Africa. So so they would say stuff like, "Oh no, I'm not an African American. I've never been to Africa. I'm an American." And even white people would use the phrase "go back to Africa," right, as an insult. And the reason why it was an insult is because if we as African Americans or those African Americans believe that Africa was fully developed, that Africa was modernized, that Africa was not the jungles, and that Africans were not savage, then go back to Africa would not be considered an insult. It's an insult because look at it this way. If we told white Americans go back to Europe, it doesn't even have the same stinging effect, right? You tell Chinese people go back to China, it doesn't. I mean, well, there is some racial tension there, but it doesn't have the same stinging effect as telling a black person to go back to Africa because years of Hollywood propaganda has programmed black Americans, many black Americans. I want to make sure I preface that many black Americans to have a negative perception of Africa. So in order to tell us to go back to Africa is then telling us to reassociate ourselves with the backwardness, to reassociate ourselves with the savagery, to reassociate ourselves with the jungle. Um, Another thing that happened was in the 80s, the famine in Ethiopia, right? So I think it used to be like I think her name was Sally Struthers would be on TV and these commercials would come on and Sally Struthers starred in these commercials, and she would be holding an Well, she would be walking with an Ethiopian baby with a bloated belly, flies all around his nose, and the people. They would show the people in the background, and they're all starving and crying, and everything just looked destitute, and the situation just looked desperate now. And so the terminology, like starving like an Ethiopian, or you're gonna get the Ethiopian belly, or flies around your face like an Ethiopian baby. All of these things became part of the Black American lexicon, as well as a part of the images, the programmed images in our brain of what Africa. So Ethiopia became a representation, right, of all of Africa, which is so odd. I often tell people that the Nile River itself, which runs from Ethiopia north into the Mediterranean, through Egypt into the Mediterranean, is 4,000 miles long. That is like traveling from New York to Los Angeles and back. That's how far the distance is of just that little portion of Africa. So Ethiopia itself, as a nation, as a country, is just a very small uh, um, territory. I don't want to say speck. Speck sounds like I'm being disrespectful, but speck on the map of this massive continent of Africa. But those photos, those pictures, and those TV images became representative of all of Africa. So this is relatively recent. This is in the 80s, right? I was born in 1979. I remember seeing these television commercials as a child, and this is what we thought Africa was. So it went from being the jungle, right, and savages to so you have one generation, right, who's thinking it's the jungle and it's savages, and then you have another generation who thinks it's destitute and starvation, and this is all negative and inaccurate as it can be, right? negative and inaccurate. But this is what shaped the perception of many Black Americans as it relates to Africa. Now, fortunately, we had very important Black figures to come along through history to kind of challenge these narratives. Most notable people like the Honorable Marcus Garvey, who had the first real massive back to Africa movement. There were others, but Edward Blyden before him. But Marcus Garvey had the first real massive back to Africa movement. And although he never stepped foot in Africa himself, he reawakened in Black Americans a pride in Africa for many Black Americans. And from Marcus's family tree, political ideological family tree, we get, Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam and many other organizations who had this pride of blackness, right? Even though they may have some still kind of trepidation as it relates to directly connecting with Africa, they do recognize that that's the root of who we are and the lies that have been told about Africa. Then in the 70s, after the civil rights movement, there was the Black Power movement. And out of the Black Power movement came many ideas about Africa that were contrary to Hollywood's presentation of Africa. So many Black Americans, started to wear what? The afro, right? They started to wear the afro. Dashikis were in vogue um, as a way of challenging the narrative of Africa being this backward place, something that we should be ashamed of. It began to be embraced, but it was trendy. It was a fad for many people, and they had not truly ingested, digested, and made it a part of their psyche, right? Of a new perception of Africa. Many did. So you had many Black folk in the 80s and the 90s who began to visit the continent and came back with different stories, different than what Hollywood had been portraying, but not enough. The vast majority of Black folk did not have the opportunity to move out and see the continent to really have that change of perception. So what we are faced with today is that there is an awakening taking place, and there's more. The internet and YouTube has allowed many Black Americans to see for themselves. If they're unable to travel, they're able to go to YouTube and type in, you know, uh, Rwanda, to type in South Africa, type in Ghana, and they can actually see video and hear other Black Americans speaking about their experiences in these places. The problem is that while this tool is at our fingertips, the ability to actually see any place in the world, any place on the continent of Africa is right at our fingertips. Many Black Americans don't have the wherewithal to even investigate for themselves. They believe what they have been told, they believe the propaganda, and they have not thought to challenge it. And for individuals like myself, when I tell Black folk about Africa, I can still see the bewilderedness. I can still see the confusion as I say, "Hey, my family and I were going to move to Africa," and they're, hmm, yeah, it's because I think if I'm speaking with someone that I know, they know that I'm not crazy or some type of weirdo, right? A decently and intelligent person. So I think there is still this hesitation because well, why would he do that kind of like thing. Conversely, if I told these same individuals I was moving to London or I was moving to Singapore, I think I would get a very different reaction. I think that reaction would be more, enthusiastic, more like, oh, that's great, man. You're going to have a great time. It's a great experience for your children, blah, 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 blah. It would be more supportive. I think there's still this hesitation when we say Africa because deep in our own psyche, deep in the psyche of many Black Americans, those negative images that have been propagated for nearly a century, or a century or more, really, um, uh, are still there. They're still in our psyche. They're still in our mind. They're still in our perception of the continent, even with the power of the internet, right? I remember telling people in 2009, prior to leaving to go to Tanzania, right? My first trip to the continent, 2009, and I was telling black people, friends of mine, college educated, graduate degree having black people, intelligent black people who are really making an impact in this country, in the black community, black people who are leaders in their industry, right, in their profession, intelligent black people. And I will never minimize their intelligence, but I had some very strange questions coming from these intelligent black folk. Very strange questions coming from these intelligent black folk. I remember being asked when I said, I'm going to Tanzania, I'm going to Africa. Someone said, well, where are you going to use the bathroom? This person had a graduate degree. Where are you going to use the bathroom? As if there were no toilets and plumbing in all of Africa. Said, another person asked, are you going to eat monkey meat? That's deep. They asked, are you going to eat monkey meat? Graduate degree having black person in the United States. Asked me in 2009, well after the internet is a thing. Well after we were all on the internet in 2009, right? Uh, Whether I would be eating monkey meat. This is the lasting and very pervasive presentation or image of Africa in the minds of many African Americans. So it's very good that we have black folk now visiting the continent, coming back, creating this content for YouTube. We have the Wody Mayas, and we have the Go Black to Africas, and we have the Blantons in South Africa, and we have all of these different people who, I mean, there's so many YouTubers now who are black Americans who have been to the continent, and they're coming back and telling us a different story. Um, it's like go tell it on the mountain, right? They have come back and they're saying, wait a minute, the person who's been lying to us for the last 3 centuries, he's been lying to us about Africa too. The person who has been lying to us about who we are as individuals, person who says that we are second class, that we're not as smart, that we're not attractive, all of these negative ideas that are pumped into black Americans. They have been lying to us about many things, and yes, they have been lying to us about Africa too. So I think that's why when our continental brothers and sisters see us and we come there and we're like, oh, we're in the motherland, and we feel this connection to the land, and it seems weird, and it seems maybe strange, and maybe seems performative in many ways. They don't know what we have been taught. So just to arrive at an airport for some is paradigm shifting. Just to arrive at a modern airport for many black Americans arriving in Ghana, arriving in Nigeria or South Africa or Kigali or Kenya, wherever, right? Arriving at a modern airport may be paradigm shifting from what we have been taught, right? And keep in mind, many black people are poor in the United States. In fact, most black people are poor in the United States. And the ability to travel and see the world, and or to know someone who has traveled and seen the world, is few and far between, right? We are just now. Keep in mind, we were afraid to travel within the United States. There was something called the Green Book, which told us which places were safe for us to stop. And this Green Book was used up until, I guess, the 60s or 70s, maybe even later. I don't know if it was necessarily used in the 80s, but definitely in the 60s and probably well into the 70s, this Green Book told us where it was safe for us to stop. So in our own country, we had to have a tool, right? A book that told us which gas stations we could stop without having fear of getting killed, which hotels and which restaurants accepted black people, right? This is in the 60s and the 70s. I was born in 1979. So this wasn't ages ago, right? This is, fairly recent, right? fairly recent. There was a movie called The Green Book that recently came out, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, in which a white guy had to drive this black piano player around the South, right? Because he would be able to what navigate these places where uh, he didn't have to worry about stopping at the certain place where a black person was because he was a white driver, right? So yeah, so I said that to say that traveling is something that's relatively new, like traveling outside of the United States. We've had a few black folk who were able to afford to go to Paris or maybe visit visit the continent. But for the masses of us, we were not able to, we were afraid to travel in the United States, or we had to be cautious about traveling in the United States till this day. Till this very day, when I travel to Texas, right, which is the next state over, and I travel to Dallas, Texas, I have to come through northern Louisiana. And there's a stretch of about a good 3 hours in northern Louisiana, right, which is kind of like very, very rural. And there are these exits off of the highway that you can take that may take you 2, 3, 4, 5 miles off. And I'm like, I'm not going that exit. I'm not taking that exit. I want to see the gas station from the highway out because I don't feel safe going deep into these small rural communities. I need to make it back home to my family, right? And to some folk, it may there's a little bit of humor there, but at the same time, it's really real. Traveling in Mississippi, it's certain places I'm not going to stop in Mississippi. I'm keeping it highway, right? Because we know how Mississippi can get down. And it may not be a jail time. I may end up, I mean, it may not be a death. I may end up in jail in Mississippi, falsely accused of something, right? So, with that being said, we are just now getting to African Americans being able to travel to the Dominican Republic. A lot of us like to go to the Dominican Republic or going to Jamaica, right? Or going anywhere in the Caribbean. Some black folk have now ventured off into Europe, right? Uh, and there's a reason why it progressed this way. Why we didn't jump first, initially straight into Africa, because of those perceptions. But I think as we traveled more, our world view changed, our perception of the world changed, and our perception of the United States changed. Hmm. That's another video, but our perception began to change, and then we begin to feel more comfortable traveling to the continent. Once this kind of black travel movement popped off, we started hearing more and more black folk moving about the continent, coming back and changing that narrative, coming back and challenging the narrative, coming back and giving us, a different perception of what we had been taught about the continent. And I think that as we move in the future, 5, 10 years from now, we will see more African Americans packing those bags and saying, "Man, I'm going to visit Africa." And the more that visit, the more that will decide that I've had enough of the United States. I've had enough of racism and white supremacy. I've had enough of structural racism. I've had enough of institutional racism. I've had enough of shrinking myself. I've had enough of the low expectations of black people. I've had enough of the disrespect from the Republicans as well as the Democratic Party. I've had enough of the United States. I've washed my hands, and I'm going to find a place to go on the continent where I can build for myself and build for my children and build for my future generations, right? So I think there's a transition. We're in a tough place right now. Not a tough place, but we're in a place where we're just kind of waking up. You got to get the stuff out your eyes and open your eyes and kind of realize where you are, who you are, all right, as you start your day. That's where we are right now. Many black Americans are right now. We're waking up, right? And we have to look around and really see where we are, orient ourselves, and we will indeed see a lot more of us transitioning, whether through visiting and tourism or actually immigrating, right? When you come from the West, they like to use the word, expatriate. That's just the white version of being an immigrant, right? We're immigrating, right? When I am trying to get into the when I'm working with the visas, the visa situation in South Africa for long term stay, it's immigration that I'm working with. I'm not working with expatriation officers. I'm working with immigration officers. But so, listen, 25 minutes is much longer than I really wanted to speak. I thank you guys for listening. Yes, we will be there in December. Adrian and I are looking forward to it. We are super duper excited. And it will actually be our first time there, kind of in the summertime. We've been in February before, so I guess that is technically still summer, but this will be our first time there during summer. We look forward to spending Christmas there. We don't technically celebrate Christmas, obviously, we're Muslim. But we're there for Christmas. We'll be there for New Year. So we're really excited about this. And Adrian's birthday is on the 31st of December. So we will also be celebrating her birthday while in the motherland. So listen, we are definitely open to meeting and greeting and having you know, breaking bread with as many people as we can and having fellowship with as many people as we can. So feel free to reach out to us. Leave us a comment in the comment section. Like, comment, and subscribe. I know we're probably one of the least consistent people channels on YouTube, but we're going to try to do better. I told Adrian today that every day that we're there in December, we're going to try to upload a video, whether it be a 5-minute video, just a check-in, or whether it be about something, important that happened or something that we experienced or whatever have you. So we'll try to upload a lot of content while we're there. And again, anybody that wants to reach out and link up while we're in Johannesburg, man, please reach out and link up. I think we might take a quick side trip to Cape Town, but if not, we'll be in Josie for the whole rep. We'll definitely go to Hardy's. I'm just going to say Hardy's. I'm not going to try to say the whole name. We're going to go to Hardy's for a little while and maybe rent a house out there and spend a weekend or something. I don't know. But anyway, man, peace and blessings to everybody. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. Like, comment, and subscribe. And I'm out.